I take anywhere between 6 to 8 showers a day. It's all about a fresh start.
Most of the time writing is spent not writing. So if you see something, you don't like it, it's not working, figure out why. If you see something and you do like it and it's working, figure out why. Rather than kind of tell the audience who a character is, I like to show the audience what a character wants. You mentioned the rules. There are rules. They were written over 2,000 years ago by Aristotle in a short book called The Poetics. The rules of drama are older than Christianity. And a young writer would do well to learn those rules. Did you develop or find the Aaron Sorkin voice? I mean, is that something you're even aware of or even think about?
It's what I'm aware of is sticking to my own voice. Mm-hmm. I learn a lot from other writers. I'm very easily influenced by other writers, and I try to be influenced by the good ones more than the not so good ones. But you can be influenced by the not so good ones too, in a bad way. I always, when I'm starting something, feel like I need to start it in somebody else's voice. For instance, with The Social Network, when I began writing, I was very aware that I was writing for characters. These were the youngest characters that I had ever written for. They alternate between 19 and then 25 years old in the movie, and that I needed to sound youthful somehow. And more than that, I needed to, you know, it was taking place in the 21st century, I'm just not somebody who's in the 21st century. So that I needed to skateboard it up or Mountain Dew it up or somehow. And there are two things about that are crazy, or I should say at least two things about that are crazy. I'm sure that anyone listening to this can count more than that. One is, not all 19-year-olds speak alike. That's not a language. And the other is, I'm terrible when I'm trying to write like somebody else. So I tried about 1.5 pages of that. Pulled my head off my torso and put it back on, and just said, you can't write like anybody but yourself. I'm a great audience member. When I come into a movie theater, when I come into a theater to see a play, when I turn on the television set, I'm the best audience member you could ask for. You can show me a magic trick 50 times and I'll still be amazed by it. But what I do, and what I would recommend to you, were talking about young writers before, is be a student as well. Have a good time watching the movie the first time, or the second time, or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, but at some point, be a diagnostician. If you don't like the movie, if the movie isn't working, don't just shrug it off and say, well, these guys, they made a junky movie. Figure out why. What went wrong in there. So if you see something, you don't like it, it's not working, figure out why. If you see something and you do like it and it's working, figure out why. Figure out how the magic trick is done, to go back to that metaphor, and then go back to enjoying the magic trick.
We're going to talk about character and hopefully mostly how Aaron develops character. So I'm just going to do, the first question is just walk me through, pick a character. Do you write like a short story about them? Do you write prose about them before you do dialogue? Do they come from real people? How does a character actually come about in your mind?
I don't do those things that you just mentioned. Other people do, and it's important to note that there is no one way to do it. Everybody does it differently. For me, rather than kind of tell the audience who a character is, I like to show the audience what a character wants. And it all boils down to intention and obstacle. Somebody wants something standing in their way of getting it. They want the girl, they want the money, they want to get to Philadelphia. It doesn't matter, but they have to want it bad. If they can need it, that's even better. Something formidable is standing in their way, and the tactics that character uses to overcome the obstacle is going to define who the character is. It's like having a Christmas tree and then hanging ornaments on it.
You write some just incredible dialogue. What is your secret so I can let other writers know and make other people's scripts better?
Well, thank you. I would tell those writers to write in their voice, to not try to write the way someone else writes. There's nothing wrong with, you know, I try to let sort of David Mamet get into my bloodstream. I try to let Tom Stoppard get into my bloodstream. Any number of writers who I revere. But I can tell you that when I'm writing, I am talking out loud. I'm playing all the parts in my head. And one of the things I think that helps with is you are less likely to write a line of dialogue that's unspeakable. You know, I love you, my dear, like the stars love you know, once you have to say it out loud, you'll get the message that you can't ask an actor to try to, you know, casualize that line.
Frankly, the best career advice I've ever gotten was probably, go, for God's sake, don't try to be a professional writer, you'll starve to death. I couldn't follow that advice because I so badly wanted to be a professional writer. But it was practice. That writing is like playing the violin. It takes practice. You get better as you get older, and you just don't get beaten down by rejection.
When people are talking about something, it isn't so much their position that I'm trying to imitate as the way they're presenting it. I'm just trying to phonetically recreate the sound of political sophistication and knowing what you're talking about. And oftentimes in things that I've written, whether it's A Few Good Men, or I wrote a movie called Malice, or The American President, or Sports Night, or The West Wing, there'll be a quick passage that'll go by, and you know, somebody, the studio, a producer, someone will say, you know, gee, no one's going to know what these two people are talking about. You know, I'll say, it's actually not important that they do. What's important is that the audience say, wow, these guys really know what they're talking about. That's interesting. And that's what I try to do.
Well, at first, all I knew was what I didn't want to do. And what I didn't want to do was a conventional biography, what we call a biopic, a biographical picture, which is a cradle-to-grave structure. It's a structure that audiences are very familiar with. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, then he went to the doctor, and then he died. So I knew what I didn't want to do. So while trying to think of what I did want to do, I just started the research process. I started talking to all the real-life people who are represented in the film and a few dozen others. I began to identify points of friction between Steve and Steve Wozniak, between Steve and his daughter Lisa, between Steve and John Scully, and so on. And I like claustrophobic spaces. I like compressed periods of time where there's a clock ticking. And I thought, maybe I can dramatize all these conflicts in 3 real-time scenes. Real time is when 30 minutes for you and the audience is the same as 30 minutes for a character on screen. And I can have them all take place backstage in the minutes leading up to one of his famous product launches. It was a radical departure from a normal structure. I went to the studio and got their permission to do it. That's something I wouldn't ordinarily do. What I knew for sure is that this was going to be a movie built entirely out of words, so you were going to need a visual master like Danny Boyle to give it any kind of visual interest, and of course you were going to need a world-class cast of actors.
Aaron, could you talk to us about your writing style? I know Dan Brown talks about how he does jumping jacks before he writes books, and Walt is a morning writer, and I write at night. What is your style when you set down? Is there some traditional thing that you always do?
Dan Brown's good. I'm going to start doing jumping jacks now. I didn't know that he did that.
Get the blood flowing is what he said. So.
I drive around a lot. I mean, I have to, you have to think of what you're going to write before you write it. And I drive around, I listen to music. Music usually will start something going. And then I talk out loud to myself. I get into arguments in the car. If you were stopped next to me at a red light, you'd think I was a crazy person. And then when I have it, I start writing it.
Cool. So any particular kind of music for writers like me who want more inspiration, who want to write great scripts? Or
it's usually, my taste in music stopped maturing once I graduated from high school. So it's music I listened to in high school. So sometimes I'll stick in a CD, or sometimes it'll just be potluck. I'll turn on the radio and hopefully just stumble across a song, maybe a song I've never heard before,
and I'll want that song to serve as score for a scene. So I'll literally start with the score and try to think of a scene, that'll go with that.
I take anywhere between 6 to 8 showers a day. Because I'm not
You're not exaggerating.
I'm not exaggerating. I'm not a germaphobe. It has nothing to do with germs. It's all about a fresh start. Okay? I was writing, it was not going well. I'm writing badly. Start again. Take a shower, put on different clothes, and you'll feel refreshed and start again.
Is it harder sober? Is it better sober?
I don't care if it's harder or better sober. I should be dead 7 times by now, and I'm so glad I'm not. Yeah, maybe it would be easier to write with Coke. Maybe I'd write better with Coke, but writing well is so important to me that there's no advantage I wouldn't give myself except that.
What was the first story you ever wrote?
I never wrote for pleasure until right after I got out of college. Until then, writing for me was a chore to be gotten through for a school assignment. I moved to New York to begin my life as a struggling actor, which is what I thought I was. I had studied acting my whole life. I was sharing this very tiny studio apartment with my ex-girlfriend, and I don't mean that she's now my ex-girlfriend. She was my ex-girlfriend then, when I was living with her, and she was dating my best friend. One weekend, she was out of town she played Strawberry Shortcake. So my ex-girlfriend went out on the Strawberry Shortcake tour. This was a Friday night in New York that anyone who lives in a big city, whether it's New York, Toronto, or any place else, you've had this night. It feels like everyone you know has been invited to a party that you haven't been invited to. Everyone's gone. For some reason, nothing in this little studio apartment that worked on electricity was working. Like the television wasn't working, the stereo wasn't working. This was about a year before Apple introduced this thing called a Macintosh. So there wasn't one of those, but what there was a high school friend of mine who was a struggling journalist. Had on that Friday with him his grandfather's semi-automatic typewriter. This is a typewriter with electric keys but a manual return. He was going out of town for the weekend with his girlfriend and didn't want to schlep it around with him. So he asked me if I could hang on to this typewriter for him. So I said, sure. So I'm in the studio apartment, no friends around, the TV isn't working, the stereo isn't working, there's no such thing as the internet. For this story to really work, I guess I had to have to say there's no such thing as books yet either. Those hadn't been invented, but and I didn't have $3 in my pocket. What I had was my friend's grandfather's semi-automatic typewriter, which also had paper in it. So the only way for me to entertain myself was to stick a piece of paper in this typewriter, and I did what I'd never done before, which was that I wrote in dialogue. And I started writing in dialogue, and I stayed up all night writing. That was the moment that I fell in love with the sound of my own voice. And started writing all night and felt a confidence doing it that I'd actually never felt with acting, even though I was a pretty cocky actor. But that morning, invited a couple of friends over and said, read this out loud for me, and they were very encouraging about it, and that's the first story I ever wrote.